what's going on, guys? Welcome to the CEO Sports Show for September 3rd, 2025. And on today's episode, we are going to be going over all of the Micah Parsons stuff. We're going to put a bow on this for this entire saga. And definitely got a lot to go over with this Micah Parsons situation. So without further ado, please make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, by the way, and please make sure to check out all of the other shows on the Kretschman media platform. I would greatly appreciate that. And without further ado, let's get into the episode. So Micah Parsons and David Mulligetta more so, was on First Take, and he was going over a lot of the things with the Micah Parsons contract. Not only that, but there was an article that came out from Jeremy Fowler that talked about everything that went on with the Cowboys side of things, right? So there was David Mulligetta's side. He was on First Take. And then there was the team side, and that was more so on the article by Jeremy Fowler. So we are going to get into both sides. I want to start off with David Mulligetta and his appearance on First Take. So the first question he was asked, well, it wasn't David Mulligetta. It was a flashback to the interview that Stephen A. Smith had with David Mulligetta. Jerry Jones was asked to follow up on a comment that he made that there were three entities in this negotiation. Play slot one.
Right now, about three entities involved in the Micah Parsons deal that really count, and that's not to dismiss everything about the organization and the Cowboys.
What are the three entities?
Micah, me, sitting out there, and about a mile back is that agent. These are the two to get it done. Always has. And these are the two that be sitting there working it out when it hits the fan, when it's not between the lines on that contract. That's why I'm going to do it.
So here's what I took from that, right? Jerry Jones wanted Micah Parsons on the Dallas Cowboys. He wanted Micah Parsons on the Dallas Cowboys under his conditions. If Micah Parsons would have accepted the contract that was put forward to him in that meeting that Jerry Jones had with Micah Parsons would still be on the Cowboys, because I think the contract was 40.5. David Mulligetta clarified that in his in one of his statements on First Take. But not only that, it was a 5-year contract, right? So that's team friendly. They can spread that cap hit across multiple years, and come year 5, that contract, like the price of what he would have gotten paid that year would have paled in comparison to what other people are getting paid, and people would have other players would have caught up with the market at that point. So that's why they would have done the 5-year contract. And that's why Jerry was like, we'll have you, we'll deal with you, but for 40.5 per year and 5 years, on the contract, because that is the most team friendly type of thing that they could do with this contract. Let's spread it across 5 years. Okay, so question, the first question that David Mulligetta was asked, he was asked about the timeline on how things unfolded with the Cowboys and Jerry Jones. So play slot 2 for me.
For us, this kind of moved at a normal pace initially. We were open to doing a deal, as we stated, with the Cowboys after his third season. And at the time, the Cowboys had other deals to do. That Dak Prescott was coming up, their quarterback, their leader, as well as CD. So we knew that we would have to wait our turn. So after his third season, after his fourth season, we asked again if they were ready to start negotiating a deal. And at that time, they told us they would let us know when they were. And for some reason, that never happened with me.
Okay, so I think I talked about this a few weeks ago. Pretty much what happened was, at the combine, David Mulligetta approached the Jones family and he said, hey, we are interested in negotiating. Jones family said, we have other contracts that we have to do at the current moment. David Mulligetta was like, cool, go handle your business. That's all fine. We'll be here. We're ready to negotiate when you guys are ready to negotiate. What I'm starting to see from this whole thing and seeing how things are playing out is that the Cowboys probably had a plan in place and the agent probably wouldn't have liked the plan if they were told the plan originally. And we're going to get more into it. But I think the plan was, hey, Micah Parsons is going to play on that 5th year, and then we're going to trade him. I think that's what the plan is. And everything that I'm seeing with this whole situation about, what David Mulligetta is saying on First Take, what they're saying in the articles, or in the article that Jeremy Fowler put out, where he cited a lot of team sources that he talked to. A lot of that is starting to make sense now. And I think this is ultimately the plan. So question number 2, he was asked about his comment to Jerry Jones, saying that he said to stick it up his ass, quote unquote. He said that apparently, according to Jerry Jones, and he was asked to clarify that. Play slot 3.
It might be hard for some to believe, but I don't think I've ever used that phrase in my life. And in my 40 plus years, I definitely wouldn't use it with somebody that I have to work with, or somebody that I plan on working with in the future. So no, that wasn't true. And there was a misrepresentation of what I said. What I did tell them was if they believed that the contract was already finalized and they were sending it over to me to be rubber stamped, then, they probably shouldn't send it over.
I don't believe that David Mulligetta told Jerry Jones to stick it up your ass when it came to the time that Jerry Jones presented the contract to David Mulligetta. I have a very hard time believing that, because David Mulligetta is going to say that Jerry Jones is the most powerful individual in the NFL. He's absolutely right when he says that. So why in the world would David Mulligetta make a comment like that? And this is what I think happened. Jerry Jones interpreted it as David Mulligetta telling him to stick it up his ass. That's what I think Jerry Jones interpreted as David Mulligetta saying, right? And I think because of that, Jerry Jones went on to Michael Irvin's podcast and said, this is pretty much what he said. I think he misquoted David Mulligetta, and I'm willing to believe David Mulligetta here. And I don't believe he said that to Jerry Jones, because that would be completely and utterly unprofessional. And you don't get to the point in which David Mulligetta got to by being completely and utterly unprofessional. That wouldn't make much sense, right? So I'm not buying that whatsoever, that David Mulligetta told Jerry Jones that. And I think it was more so, hey, look, if you think you have a contract done, that's not the case. Like, you have to negotiate that with me. So I think that's more so what happened there, rather than what Jerry Jones said on Michael Irvin's podcast. So in the next question, he was asked about the meeting that Jerry Jones and Micah Parsons had back in March. Please play slot 4.
As far as Micah's concerned, he was out of the country. He got a call from Jerry's assistant and was asked to come in to meet about leadership. So when he got back from his vacation, he came in and he gave them a call, told him he was back, he was ready to meet. At some point during that meeting that was represented to him was going to be about leadership, it turned into contract talk. And, if you're a 25-year-old football player and your boss, who happens to be the most powerful person in the NFL, starts talking about contracts, it's hard for you to end that conversation. So they had a conversation. Micah nodded his head out of respect. Obviously, there's a power dynamic that's a little different there. One guy is the owner of the team and the GM. And the other one is Micah Parsons, a young 25-year-old football player. So I'm not sure if there was a miscommunication there by the time Micah walked out, but at no point did Micah believe that he was negotiating a contract.
I don't believe David Mulligetta is telling the full story here. Jerry Jones and Micah Parsons, they had a close relationship. They talked about a lot of things. Micah Parsons and Jerry Jones were at the Ohio State and Texas game that took place in Jerry World. They were in the same box with each other. They obviously had a relationship. If Jerry Jones was talking numbers with Micah Parsons, it's probably because they had that type of relationship. And it's probably something that happened in the past. I don't think the full story is being told with that comment from David Mulligetta. Micah Parsons is a guy who wanted the front office to move quicker with these negotiations. And I think because he wanted these things to move quicker, I think Micah Parsons opened himself up to talk about numbers and a contract negotiation. But at the end of the day, yes, David Mulligetta, what he said is partially right, that Jerry Jones, the most powerful person in the sport, wanted to talk numbers with Micah Parsons. What are you going to do? Say, hey, talk to my agent. Understand your leverage. You're one of the best defensive players in football. I don't want to talk numbers. I'm just not comfortable doing that. I'm sorry, Mr. Jones. I would prefer to not talk numbers. Like that's what you have to do in that situation. I get it. It's not fun. It may not be, the easiest thing to do, but in that point, if you actually did not want to talk numbers, there's absolutely no reason why he should have been talking numbers with Jerry Jones. And there's a piece in this article that was written by ESPN that makes me look at this a little differently, right? But so David was asked the next question. He was asked why Jerry Jones didn't want to sit down and have a negotiation with him. Play slot 5.
I think that was the part for us that was the most confusing, right? I understand Jerry's always going to do what's best for the Cowboys, and we get that, right? His job is to do what's best for the team and put them in the best situation to win. In this situation, once Micah asked for his representation to be involved, we assumed that would go like any other negotiation, and they would reach out, or they would allow me to reach out and commence negotiations. But I can't answer that question. I'm not sure how this turned the way it did. We were open to negotiate. We reached out numerous times to Adam Periska there, who does their contracts. I've reached out to Stephen Jones as well and asked him, to start negotiations. But for some reason, coming out of that conversation, Jerry believed that he had reached an agreement and he was not open to negotiating any further.
I mean, he pretty much told you what Jerry Jones was thinking. They didn't want to negotiate with Micah Parsons because they didn't want to sign him to what he would have ultimately gotten signed to. They wanted him to play this 5th year out, and then they wanted to trade him in the offseason. So to all the people with a microphone in front of their face telling NFL executives how to do their jobs, understand that they had the same plan that you did, right? Because I hear a lot of people on ESPN and a bunch of podcasts across YouTube or wherever it may be. They should have traded him earlier in the offseason, man. They wanted to trade him in the offseason. They just didn't want to trade him in this offseason. They wanted to get another year out of him and then ultimately end up shipping him out. That's what I think they wanted to do. But when Micah Parsons started acting the way that he did and being as much of a distraction, and not only that, let's be honest here, Micah Parsons didn't want to play on that 5th year option. And I understand that. I get that. But I also understand where the Cowboys are coming from. We have him under contract. We're paying him $23 million. We want him to play on the 5th year option. And I understand where Micah Parsons is coming from when he says, I don't want to play on the 5th year option. I'm one of the best defensive players in the league. I want security. Neither side to me is wrong, because you have to look at this from the business standpoint. They had a plan and the opposite party was not on board with that plan. Okay, I understand this because I see all these people making these passionate rants. Ryan Clark, Mark Schlereth. You got to do this, man. You got to do that. Like, how could they do this to Micah Parsons? Get over yourselves. Okay? Don't feel bad for Micah Parsons, guy who's slated to make $23 million this upcoming season. Right? Feel bad for the single mom that has to work 3 jobs. Not the guy who's making millions upon millions upon millions of dollars that ultimately, because they wanted him to play on this 5th year option, would have probably made even more money than he made this year. Like that's what I don't understand. It's like he was going to get compensated for this year. I understand where Micah Parsons is coming from. And if he didn't want to play on that 5th year option, it is what it is. I agree with him. But I also agree with the Cowboys when they're like, look, this is our plan of attack here. We want Micah Parsons to play on this 5th year option, and then we want to trade him. And Micah Parsons is like, no, I don't want to play on that 5th year option. And I'm going to let you know that I don't want to play on that 5th year option. It's business. Stop taking this personally. They're not taking it personally. I don't think either side, from what's coming out in the media, I don't think either one of these sides are taking this personally. Both sides understand this is business. So for the fans out there that are like, how can they do this to Micah Parsons, man? Get out of your feelings. Seriously. Okay. So next question. David was asked if he was an advocate of the NFLPA getting involved and probing the Cowboys about doing negotiations without the players' representative. Play slot 6.
My expectation is that the NFLPA, that's what they're there for, right? To protect player rights. So I would assume that they'd want to look into this, but, as far as how they do that, how they operate, it's a little bit above my head.
I mean, come on now. The NFLPA. NFLPA is a joke. The NFLPA is a joke. It's one of the weakest unions. It might be the weakest union in sports. The NFLPA is not going to do anything about this. And trust me, Jerry Jones knows that they're not going to do anything about this. Jerry Jones is telling the public that we had a contract negotiation. He has put this on record. And the NFLPA is hearing that he's putting this on record. They're not going to do anything about this. And Jerry Jones knows they're not going to do anything about this. Yeah, I negotiated with this player without his representation. You going to do something about it? It's not going to happen. So, I put forward Micah Parsons should file a grievance if he's that upset. He should have. If he's that upset about the situation, he should have filed a grievance. But I think that there was, Micah Parsons, if they would have done an investigation into this, maybe that makes Micah Parsons look a little different than what David Mulgeta and his side is saying about Micah Parsons. So, the next question, David was asked if this situation will affect George Pickens and his potential contract negotiation. Play slot 7.
Yeah, my partner Trayvon Smith and I represent George, and again, we've talked about that over and over again. We there's nothing personal here, right? It's a business transaction as far as the contract is concerned. So if George Pickens does what we expect him to do, which is be one of the best receivers in the NFL this year, we'll have those conversations with the Cowboys, and if they're open to having that dialogue with us and negotiating a long-term deal, then we'd love for George Pickens to be a star with a star in his helmet. But if that's not the case, then obviously we'll see what else is out there for him. But again, this is not going to affect any negotiations moving forward for us.
Exactly. It's not going to affect anything going forward for Mulgeta or the Cowboys. Like, that's just bad business. Again, these guys on ESPN, they get emotional. Trust me, Ryan Clark gets emotional every single day. I can't believe it, man. Trust me, I see on his podcast all the time how emotional he gets. David Mulgeta doesn't get emotional. That's why he's one of the best agents in the world. Because he's not tied to emotion. This is strictly business for him. Why in the world would he cut off the Cowboys from doing business with the Cowboys? Why in the world would he do that? Why would he do that to his clients? Why would he do that to any of his clients that want to go play for the Cowboys? They're the #1 brand in sports. And I don't think Jerry Jones is opposed to negotiating with David Mulgeta because, again, you don't get to where Jerry Jones got to if you're an emotional person. Again, all these ESPN guys, Dan Orlovsky, he's emotional. RG3, he's emotional. These guys are emotional. The people who actually matter, Jerry Jones, David Mulgeta, these guys aren't emotional. These guys have done contract negotiations after contract negotiations. They understand it's all business. They don't get in their feelings. So, does this affect the Cowboys' ability to do negotiations with David Mulgeta? No. Does this affect David Mulgeta's ability to do contract negotiations with the Cowboys? No. Because, again, that would be an emotional response. And I don't think either side benefits from cutting ties with each other. Because the Cowboys are going to bring in players that are represented by David Mulgeta. And David Mulgeta is going to represent players that play for the Cowboys. And those players are going to want to stay with the Cowboys. There's plenty of players that want that. Oh, Micah Parsons wanted that. Literally wanted that. And we'll even play that in the next slot here. David was given the opportunity to say anything he needed to about this negotiation. Play slot 8.
I think the most important thing is that Micah wanted to be a Cowboy, right? He grew up cheering for the Cowboys, wore the blue and white at Penn State. Wore it in the NFL with the Dallas Cowboys. He wanted to be a Cowboy. We did everything we could for him to remain a Cowboy. We reached out, and like you said, I don't really do these interviews. We try to keep the negotiations out of the media. But in this case, so much information has been put out there that we wanted to just address a couple of things. But as far as Micah is concerned, he wanted to be a Cowboy. We did everything we could. And sometimes you got to be a little careful with what you read in the media as far as what was offered to Micah, the guarantees that were offered, the APY that was offered. There's so much that goes into an NFL contract. If you look at many of these contracts that the Cowboys have done over the past few years and the recent ones, the guarantees don't stretch much further than the first new year. If you look at Micah's current deal, he has guarantees into 4 years from now. So again, there are certain things that have been put out in the media to make it look as though Micah turned down a fair or a great deal, but that's simply not the case.
You heard what he said. He wanted to be a Cowboy. And by the way, I saw a post out there on X where people said like, oh, well, if he wanted to be a Cowboy, then why did he request a trade? Well, he requested a trade because the contract negotiations weren't going anywhere. So, hey, if the contract negotiations aren't going to go anywhere, I want out of here. And as time went by, ultimately, contract negotiations didn't go anywhere. And they traded him, is what it is. Business transaction. I want to move on to this ESPN article that was put out. This is by Jeremy Fowler and Don Venata Jr. with additional reporting from Todd Archer, Rob Domowski, Dan Graziano, and Seth Wickersham. Why are last names like getting, for some reason, so hard to pronounce now? The pivotal meeting that led to one of the most shocking NFL trades of the past decade occurred on a pleasant North Texas morning in mid-March, 5 months and a lifetime of ill feelings ahead of any deal put to paper. The agenda for the March 18th one-on-one in Dallas Cowboys owner Jerry Jones's office at the Star, the headquarters in Frisco, Texas, between Jones and two-time first-team All-Pro pass rusher Micah Parsons remains in question. A source close to Jones says it was Parsons who asked for the meeting, and the 82-year-old owner always understood the subject to be Parsons' contract. After declaring in February 2024 that he wanted to be a Cowboy for life, Parsons has been trying to reach an extension with the team without success. Quote, Jerry and Micah had met periodically over the last 4 years to discuss business and leadership issues. The source said, noting that the then 25-year-old Parsons viewed Jones as a mentor. Jerry loved having these conversations with Micah, but the meeting in March wasn't that, despite Micah saying publicly it was to discuss leadership. Micah told Jerry, I want to come in and discuss where we are, meaning a contract extension. So that was Jones's expectation. A source close to Parsons said that this is absolutely not true, and Jones called Parsons in for a leadership meeting, only to steer the conversation towards contract talks. The source says Parsons directed Jones to talk details with his agent, David Mulugeta. However, the conversation got to a contract extension. Both parties acknowledged that it got there. So, over a 3-hour meeting, Jones and Parsons discussed numbers, years, and guaranteed money. Both sides expected to reset the market for edge rushers, topping the $40 million average per season and $123.5 million guaranteed that Myles Garrett and the Cleveland Browns had received 9 days earlier. Parsons, 52 sacks in his career, are the fifth most in a player's first 4 seasons. Jones said after Parsons left his office at the Star, the owner believed an agreement was done. Later that day, Parsons called Chief Operating Officer and co-owner Stephen Jones, Jerry's son, in an attempt to get more money out of the deal, the source told ESPN. Quote, Parsons called Stephen and asked, can we do this? Can we change the numbers and the guarantee? The source said he started negotiating. He asked for several different elements and increases. This became a negotiation that Micah was in charge of. Stephen Jones consulted with his father, and Jerry agreed to the sweetened terms. The Cowboys believed they had a deal in place with Parsons and would continue to insist that he agreed to it. Though the exact terms aren't known, Cowboys sources insist they offered more guaranteed money than the 136 Parsons would get from Green Bay, albeit spread across a 5-year extension. Not the 4-year extension the Packers worked out. It was north of $150 million, the source said. The Cowboys had been known to conduct contract talks without players' agents present, a practice known around the league as hotboxing. Dak Prescott's 2024 deal was one such negotiation whereby the Joneses and the quarterback discussed Prescott's place within the organization future, and Prescott's agent Todd France came in later to negotiate the finer details of the contract. Quote, "I never engaged in numbers," Prescott said. "The deal was eventually signed the day of Dallas's first game of the season." If the Cowboys expected this negotiation to follow the same path, Mulugeta was about to confront them with a counterpoint. Jones would say in August on Michael Irvin's podcast, "We were going to send the terms over to the agent, and the agent said, 'Don't bother because we've got all that to negotiate.'" To this day, Parsons' agency has never seen the final details of the structure of the deal that Jones said he cut with Parsons in April. Per a source close to Parsons, Jones and Mulugeta would never truly negotiate at any point. Dallas would simply say the deal is done. Parsons can have it if he wants. Mulugeta declined to comment for this story, but discussed the matter on ESPN's First Take. Quote, "I'm the one who has to sign the check, and Micah is the one who has to agree to it," Jones said on April 1st at the NFL owners' spring meeting in Palm Beach, Florida. "That's the straightest way to get there, is the one who writes the check and the one agreeing to is talking, agreeing to it, talking." The Jones source said he had nothing against Mulugeta, though Jones insisted to reporters in Palm Beach that he didn't know Mulugeta's name, adding, quote, "The agent is not a factor here or something to worry about." At that point, Jones was dug in because, quote, "Micah looked him in the eyes and said, 'We have a deal.'" The source relayed a feeling from Jones of, quote, "Oh, so that's how they are going to do it. Mike is going to negotiate with us. We're going to go up. We're going to have an agreement." And then the agent says that the floor, that's the floor, and we're going up from here. Jerry was like, "Hell no, that's not the way this is going to work." Wow, just a lot to dive into here. Although Jones would later say the team began discussing the idea of a Parsons trade in the spring, Dallas did not explore trade talks involving Parsons before the draft, per a Cowboys team source. For one, the contract negotiations were still fresh and the team harbored hope of Parsons accepting the previously discussed deal. The Cowboys also prefer to do trades post-draft when they believe other teams are less inclined to cling to personnel. The Pickens deal reinforced that philosophy. But the longer Parsons went without a contract, the less likely he and Mulugeta were to accept the terms Jones believed had been agreed upon in March. The edge rusher market had begun to skyrocket in the weeks before the Jones-Parsons summit at the Cowboys practice facility. Max Crosby signed a 3-year, $106.5 million contract, $91.5 million guaranteed, and Browns Myles Garrett, 40 per year, $123.5 million guaranteed. And then there was TJ Watt with the 3-year, $123 million extension. Sources close to Parsons believe that he, more than 3 years younger than Garrett and 5 years younger than Watt, would blow those deals away. And a Cowboys source said the team got indications that Parsons camp would prefer to go last in the pass rush market because prices were only rising. As Jones watched the market spike around him, the owner and general manager grew increasingly comfortable letting Parsons play on his 5th year or trading him. Quote, "For Jerry, it came back to," and this is some more information about why they ended up trading Micah Parsons. Quote, "For Jerry, it came back to, we have to be able to stop the run," the source said close to Jones. "Micah does not do that. In fact, because we couldn't stop the run, it made Micah less effective. Then they're going to run right at him, and that's not what he does. We could not take care of mission critical." Still, the Cowboys were preparing as if Parsons would be in the lineup in 2025. They understood how difficult it would be to trade him. Even though a team source said they were unconcerned about the public relations fallout the team would face given the popularity with the fans. This was a business and personnel consideration only, and the Joneses' belief that the price would have been 2 first-round picks and an established defensive player was crystallized as the return about a week out from the trade, per a team source. There is a lot more of this article that I want to get into. One of the things that they talked about was Micah Parsons laying on the medical table during a game. And it said, quote, Charles Haley would have flipped him off the damn table if he saw that, a team source said. So there's just a lot to get into here. And man, I wish I could get into more, but I don't want this to turn into a whole hour show. But ultimately, this is what I think happened with the Cowboys and Micah Parsons. Again, this is not me saying that this is 100% what happened. But when I'm reading both stories here, when I see what David Mulligetta is saying and I'm seeing what this article is saying, I think that there's a lot not being told. I do think that Micah Parsons wanted to negotiate with Jerry Jones. I think he wanted to move the contract talks on, but I don't think he wanted to finalize the details, right? I don't think he wanted to finalize the contract. I just think he wanted to go in there and say, okay, I've seen how you guys have handled contracts in the past, and I just want to progress these talks that we're going to have because I want to get this done so that I can show up to OTAs if you were to show up to OTAs, be there at training camp, and that you guys know how to structure things going forward with your roster when it comes to potential free agents and money that we could have cleared up because of a contract extension being signed. I think that's what happened. And I do think that there was a deal that was agreed upon. I'm willing to believe Jerry Jones on that one. I think that David Mulligetta is spinning this a little bit. Like, yeah, they agreed to a deal, but you have to understand what's happening here when it comes to, Micah Parsons is dealing with the most powerful person in the NFL, right? Like, that's not inaccurate. He's not lying when he says that. But I think that Micah Parsons agreed to a contract. He did a little bit of negotiating. And then when the Cowboys said, hey, we have a contract here, David Mulligetta was like, oh, no, you don't, because I need to be involved in these things, which is fair. As an agent, you're supposed to do a job, and the job is to negotiate for your client. And I think that David Mulligetta, more so, all these stories that are coming out is just the agency trying to, tell people like, yeah, they negotiated it, but I mean, you got to understand where he's coming from here. But at the same time, like the way I look at this is Micah Parsons shouldn't have been negotiating a contract, right? Like, there should have been nothing in terms of numbers. If he was called in for a leadership meeting, it should have been, okay, this is leadership. All right, now we're starting to talk about numbers. Mikey, you have some leverage here too, right? You can walk out of that meeting. You'd be like, look, I don't want to talk numbers. If you want to talk numbers, we can get my agent on the phone and we can start talking about numbers. That's how he should have handled this, right? I get it. He's the most powerful man in the sport. But at the same time, we need to hold Micah Parsons to a standard. Because Micah Parsons was in that box with Jerry Jones during the Ohio State versus Texas game at AT&T Stadium. So they probably had discussions there. I want to get the contract going. I want to do this. I want to do that. And I think the Cowboys looked at this and said, unless Micah Parsons is on a team-friendly contract, he's not coming back. If he wants to come back on a team-friendly contract, we're absolutely open to having him, but it's got to be over 5 years, and we can't be resetting the market by $4 to $5 million. And ultimately, Micah Parsons ended up resetting the market by $6 million. But David Mulligetta looked at his client, and he said, my client is worth this. He's worth resetting the market by over $6 million per year. And I don't think the Cowboys valued Micah Parsons to that extent. And I think that there's a lot of teams out there that probably agree with what the Cowboys did. Because obviously you're going to have, your agent water carriers like Jordan Schultz. He's going to ask certain executives about, what happened with this whole Micah Parsons thing. And I'm sure that there were executives that looked at this and like, wow, the Cowboys are silly for doing this. And Jordan Schultz made sure that everybody knew that the executive that texted him that, he made sure that everybody knew about that because, again, he's an agent water carrier. That's what he does. But I think a lot of executives agree with what the Cowboys did here. And I think a lot of them would make this same deal, especially if they saw how Micah Parsons conducted himself. Because in this article, it says the Cowboys liked the player. They did not like the person. And that type of stuff matters when you're talking about resetting the market by as much as Micah Parsons reset the market. They were okay with resetting the market with Dak Prescott because they like the player and they like the person. They like the leadership that Dak Prescott brings to that organization. But with Micah Parsons, they had questions about him. He didn't show up for OTAs. He showed up for a practice this year, but over the past few years, he was not present at OTAs. He was not the leader that they wanted him to be. And that's the type of stuff that the Cowboys paid attention to. If you are going to be paid the most in the NFL at your position, you need to do the most. You need to be the most productive. You need to be the best leader that you can be. You need to be the best teammate that you can be. And I think that's how Jerry Jones looked at it. You're going to play on your 5th year, and we'll see what happens. I think ultimately they wanted to trade him because I don't think they wanted that much money on their salary cap tied into one player. But there's a lot not being told about this story. And both sides are going to make it seem like one side is clearly in the wrong and the other side isn't. And I just don't agree with that. I as the days go on after this Micah Parsons trade, I'm starting to really respect that Jerry Jones made this trade, because ultimately you cannot have that much money tied into one player. When you see the contract that he got signed to, you better be the most productive. You better be the best teammate. You better be the best leader. That's how Jerry Jones looked at this. And he made a decision and he stuck to it. Now, the plan didn't go according to the plan because, like I said, the plan was play on your 5th year option and then trade you. So the plan didn't go accordingly. But ultimately, they accelerated the process by a year. They traded him. They got 2 first-round picks. They got a defensive tackle that's going to help them out this year. They weren't going to win a Super Bowl this year with Micah Parsons. They probably weren't going to win a Super Bowl the following year with Micah Parsons. So knowing that, hey, let's make it an emphasis to make this defense better as a team. We have the superstars on offense to be able to put up the points that we need to go win football games. They need to add a running back. They probably need to add another offensive lineman. But overall, this is a pretty complete offense that they have. Defensively, that's where you look at it and it's like, oh, there's some holes there. Right? Like, what's the future of the cornerback position look like with that team? They have a lot of linebackers on 1-year contracts. The safety position, defensive tackle. They looked at these things and they said, okay, what does the future look like? And how do we get to the future where we have a legitimate, complete team defense that teams can't look at them and say, okay, we are going to target this player. We're going to take that player out of the game, because a team can take one player out of a game. They can do that. But like when you look at what the Eagles had, where the guys who pretty much won that Super Bowl for them were Josh Sweat and Milton Williams, I think the Cowboys were like, how do we get that? And do we get that with re-signing Micah Parsons to this type of contract? And I want to talk about last thing real quick here. David Mulligata talked about, well, when it comes to Micah Parsons, that 5th year was a deal breaker for us because the pass rusher market's going to go up to $65 to $70 million. I'm going to be honest with you. Excuse my language because I don't like cursing on here. That's bullshit. That is utter bullshit. The pass rusher market's not going up to $65 to $70 million because who's gonna get it to that point in the next 5 years, right? He was saying, oh, well, Nick Bosa got paid $35 million. Micah Parsons got paid $47 million. Who is going to reset the market? What defensive player that's up for a contract do teams think, no, we're going to pay them $48 million? Anywhere close to $50 million in the next few years. Aiden Hutchinson, I don't think there is a way in hell that the Lions are going to extend Aiden Hutchinson to over $47 million a year. It's not happening. There is no way in hell the pass rusher market's going to be $65 million. He's putting that out there because he wants to paint the Cowboys in a bad light. Like, oh, well, he's leaving this much money on the table so that all these ESPN dopes and all these people on social media say, well, you see what they were trying to do? They were trying to rob him of $30 million. Like, no, that was never going to be the case. I'm not going to be surprised if the market in the next 5 years, when Micah Parsons' contract is, through with the Green Bay Packers, that it's at like $55 million. I don't think there's any way in hell it gets to $60 million. The quarterback market, yeah, Dak Prescott's at $60 million. No other quarterback's close to that. Right? Like Lamar Jackson might get extended this year and he might get over 60 million. But there's no way in hell 65 million in the next 5 years for pass rushers. Not happening. Not happening. And that's going to be it for the show, guys. Appreciate you guys for coming out. Please make sure to hit that like button, subscribe. I'll greatly appreciate that. And I will see you guys in the next episode.